There's a ship in English naval records with a name that sounds almost like a joke, the Jesus of Lübeck. Not a nickname, not a myth. Its actual official name, painted on the stern, recorded in the King's own inventory. It started its life as a warship, built for a German trading city and later folded into the English Royal Fleet. It ended its life at the bottom of a Mexican harbor, having spent its final years hauling hundreds of kidnapped Africans across the Atlantic under a charter signed by Queen Elizabeth I herself. This isn't a story about one captain's greed. It's a story about how a state actually gets involved in something like the slave trade, not through a single evil decision, but through ordinary bureaucratic tools, ownership, chartering, and investment. Let's look at how it worked. The ship was originally built in the early 1500s in Lübeck, a powerful trading city in what's now northern Germany and a leading member of the Hanseatic League, a network of merchant cities that dominated trade across northern Europe for centuries. German shipbuilders of the era routinely gave their vessels religious names, Jesus, Mary, Trinity, as a kind of invoked protection for the voyage. It wasn't unusual. It was standard practice. Around 1540, the ship came into English hands, brought into King Henry VIII's growing Royal Navy. It wasn't a merchant vessel at that point. It was a warship, roughly 700 tons, one of the larger hulls in the English fleet. It saw combat in 1545 during a French invasion attempt on the Isle of Wight, and that same year, it was used in an unsuccessful attempt to salvage cannon from the wreck of the Mary Rose, Henry VIII's flagship, which had just sunk in the Solent. So by the 1550s, this was already a ship with a real military history, battle-tested, crown-owned, sitting in England's naval inventory. That matters because what happened to it next wasn't the story of a private merchant building a slaving operation from scratch. It was the story of an existing piece of state infrastructure being handed over for a new purpose. By the early 1560s, the Jesus of Lübeck was aging and had fallen into disrepair. Rather than scrap it, Queen Elizabeth I, who had inherited the ship along with the rest of the royal fleet, chartered it out. Chartering, in this context, meant something specific. The crown retained ownership of the ship, but leased its use to a group of merchants for a defined voyage in exchange for a share of the profits. This was an unusual practice for expensive state assets like warships, but it meant that whatever that ship did next, the state had a direct financial interest in the outcome. In 1563, the Jesus of Lübeck was chartered to a syndicate of merchants. Leading that syndicate and commanding the ship was a Devon-born sailor named John Hawkins, a man who had already made one slaving voyage the year before, in 1562, using smaller ships he owned privately, and had returned with enough profit to attract serious backers, including members of the Queen's own court. This is the mechanism worth sitting with for a second. The crown wasn't running the slave trade directly. It didn't need to. It simply made its assets, ships, capital, royal protection, available to private operators in exchange for a cut. The state didn't have to get its hands dirty to profit from the trade. It just had to own the boat. With the Jesus of Lübeck now under his command, Hawkins set sail from England in October 1564 on his second slaving expedition, a larger, better-financed operation than his first. He sailed for the West African coast, particularly around Sierra Leone, where he and his crew captured or acquired more than 400 Africans through a mix of raiding, deception, and purchase from local intermediaries and rival Portuguese traders. From there, the Jesus of Lübeck crossed the Atlantic and sold most of its captives in Spanish colonial ports in the Caribbean and along the coast of what's now South America, technically in violation of Spain's trade monopoly in the region. Which is part of why these voyages were as much about smuggling and undercutting Spanish and Portuguese trade dominance as they were about the slave trade itself. Hawkins returned to England with a substantial profit, along with cargo like hides, ginger, and sugar taken in trade. The voyage was, by the financial standards of the time, an enormous success. And success in this system meant one thing: more backing for the next voyage. Elizabeth I's involvement in Hawkins Voyages wasn't passive. She didn't merely permit the use of a royal ship. By most accounts, she directly profited from the operation and continued backing Hawkins for further voyages after this one proved lucrative. Hawkins himself was later granted a coat of arms that included the image of a bound African captive, a detail that makes explicit what the chartering arrangement only implied: that this was an enterprise the Crown was willing to formally recognize and reward. This is the part of the story that complicates the usual picture of the slave trade as something driven purely by private greed, operating in the shadows of respectable society. The Jesus of Lübeck's voyages happened in the open, financed in part through state-owned infrastructure, with the monarch as a stakeholder in the outcome. The system wasn't hiding. It was simply organized in a way that let the Crown benefit without ever having to be the one holding the whip. The Jesus of Lübeck made a total of 2 slaving voyages under Hawkins before its story came to an abrupt end. In 1568, during a third major expedition, this one commanded jointly by Hawkins and his young cousin, Francis Drake, the fleet was damaged by a storm in the Gulf of Mexico and forced to take shelter in the harbor of San Juan de Ulúa, near what's now Veracruz, Mexico. While anchored there, an incoming Spanish treasure fleet arrived, and after a tense standoff, fighting broke out. The English ships were badly outgunned. The Jesus of Lübeck, old and already damaged, was lost in the battle. Hawkins and Drake escaped with only a fraction of their crew and ships, and the disaster at San Juan de Ulúa would go on to shape English-Spanish relations for decades, feeding directly into the rivalry that would eventually explode into the Spanish Armada 20 years later. The ship that had once tried to salvage Henry VIII's flagship and later helped launch England's participation in the slave trade ended its life sunk in a Mexican harbor, a footnote in a much larger imperial conflict. No one needed to invent a secret meaning behind this ship's name for its story to be disturbing. It was exactly what the historical record says it was: a royal warship, chartered by the Crown, commanded by a merchant captain, that carried hundreds of kidnapped people across the Atlantic, with the Queen of England as a financial stakeholder in the outcome. The state didn't need to run the slave trade to profit from it. It just needed to own the ship, take its cut, and let private hands do the rest. That arrangement, state infrastructure, private operators, shared profit, wasn't an accident. It was the template. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If this kind of history, the systems, the paperwork, the machinery behind it all, is something you want more of, hit subscribe and drop a comment below with what you'd like us to dig into next. And if you haven't already, go check out episode 1. The story of the insurance claim that turned 132 deaths into a business dispute. Don't miss it.